A shrapnel fragment flew in and blew the child's head off. At some point, you couldn't even leave the neighborhood. Not even the backyard. The shell went straight through. There were a lot of dead bodies. A lot. When Russian troops entered a certain area, it became safer there. As we were approaching a Ukrainian block post, we hoped they would let us through, but the situation turned in our favor. The block post no longer existed. It had been destroyed along with everyone who was there, and that's what allowed us to get out. I saw dead bodies right here on Panfilov Street. It was hard to even count them. Not just bodies, torn apart fragments. A leg here, a torso there, other body parts scattered around. I saw the same on the square. We went there to check what had happened to the house. There were a lot of dead bodies. That smell of death lingered for a long time. As you walked past a destroyed house, you could smell it, that stench of death coming from inside. It was clear. There were residents buried under the rubble. There was just total uncertainty. No info at all, no way to get in touch with anyone. Barely any mobile service, all the phones were dead because there was no power. Just so you get it, a basement helps against bullets or shrapnel, sure, but if a big missile or bomb hits directly, that's it. The whole building collapses, basement gets buried. It's like a stone coffin. You end up trapped alive down there. And the worst part is that there is nobody around to dig you out. Let's say there are 4 entrances. If one got blocked, you could try to get out through the 3rd or 4th. But what if those got hit too? That's it. Stone trap. It got to the point where the walls were shaking, everything was rumbling. I went upstairs to take a look. In the stairwell, all the apartment doors were twisted like figure eights. That's how strong the blast wave was. The doors just flew off, like tin cans. I said, "Guys, we need to go. Grab your documents, whatever you can carry, we're getting out. Staying here is too dangerous. If we get buried now, no one's gonna dig us out. No one's coming. There's no one left." We all headed out. I said, "Grab a white sheet so they can see we're civilians." We crossed Azovstal Street toward the Victory Square. There was heavy fighting going on there. Crossing the street was the most dangerous moment. It was wide open. No one shot at us at that moment. We made it across. An older lady, a neighbor from the 3rd floor, she dropped dead right there in the middle of the street. Heart attack. Just collapsed and died. My daughter went over to her. I said, "We can't help her anymore. We have to keep going. We can't stay here." So we left. That's how people were dying. Civilians. People buried the dead right next to the apartment buildings. In front yards, flower beds, private gardens. Right by the entrances, 5 or 10 meters away, in the green zone. They'd put up little tablets with names, so at least someone would know who was buried there. Once I saw one of the old buildings, got hit right in the corner of the basement near school number 40. I think there was an old lady down there. She died. It hit the basement directly. Still, we all knew basements were better than staying in the apartments. I saw one apartment where a shell went straight through. I don't know how it didn't explode. It just shot clean through. The guy who lived there told me about it, said it was some kind of miracle. You know those apartments that face both sides of the building? It blew through everything, room to room. That's how strong the impact was. Around the 10th of March, that's when the real horror started. The airstrikes began. The artillery kind of slowed down a bit, but then the bombs started falling. And the terrifying thing about an airstrike is that there's no way to hide from it. No basement will save you. Nothing will. If a bomb is headed your way, you're done. The building collapses and you're buried under it. Guaranteed. I was going to get some water again, the first time after the airstrikes began, and that's when I saw a building that had been hit. It was the main post office, just gone. The whole frame smashed down to the basement. And that's when real fear kicks in. When you realize if that hits you, that's it. Like with the rocket launchers, howitzers, all that, you can sort of adapt. You start to recognize them by sound. You know when something's coming and what kind. But with airstrikes, you don't hear them, you don't see them, and you can't do a damn thing. That's when it got really scary. After that, we stopped going out for water so often. Those were the hardest days, right up until we finally got evacuated from the city. At some point, you couldn't even leave the neighborhood, not even your own backyard. Everyone basically became hostages. When there was no more electricity, no gas, people started going to their sheds, garages, grabbing whatever they could to cook outside on wood fires. Some had old kerosene heaters stored in the garage. The Ukrainian forces said, "Today you can still go get your stuff, but starting tomorrow, that's it. No one leaves their block, no one goes anywhere." No one talked to the Ukrainian soldiers, no one asked them anything. We just ignored them. You know, it was that feeling of total helplessness. They're shooting at you, and what can you do? You move from one corner thinking it's safer, and that's exactly where it hits. And of course, I was worried about my family, my loved ones. What could we even do? No information, nothing. Only later, when Russian troops came in, we started getting bits of news. Before that, we were completely on our own. No idea who was where, what was going on. The shooting was non-stop. We ended up right in a spot where gunfire didn't stop for a minute. But you couldn't see anyone. No Russians, no Ukrainians, just endless noise. And the worst part, worrying about your family. There were kids in the house. My son was in the city center. What happened to him? Did he make it out or not? There was zero connection, no way to know. There were neighborhoods over by Katastroy area that didn't get touched at all. But here, total destruction. In the areas where the Ukrainians had their strongholds, that's where the real horror was. The unknown, that was the worst part. The total overwhelming uncertainty. We had a doctor, Andrei Ivanovich Ignatiuk, head of the therapy department at the 4th hospital. He stayed at the hospital till the very end, helping people, treating them, just like the rest of the doctors. This was already late March. One day, he and one of the patients, a man with a light injury, got in his car, grabbed some water jugs, and went out to get some water. There was a place at the tram depot, the tram park, where they had technical water in a big tank. But they never made it back. His car was shot up and both of them died right there in the vehicle, at the intersection of Taganrogskaya and 1st of May Street. There was a Ukrainian blogpost there. And you could clearly see they were civilians in a regular car. And this wasn't some one-off case. There were plenty of stories like that when Ukrainian forces fired on civilian cars. People just trying to leave the city or get to another district. A buddy of mine was staying at my place with his wife and kid. One day he was like, "Let's go check on my house. I want to see if it's still standing. I'm scared to go alone. Come with me." And I think, well, I need to check on my gym in the Primorsky district anyway. So we get in the car, him, his wife, and me. He's driving, I'm in the front, she's in the back. We drive into the city from the direction of Melekino, past a Russian block post at the city entrance. All good. We're driving along thinking, all right, we made it past the checkpoint, seems calm, no one around. And then, out of nowhere, a Ukrainian soldier jumps out of a ditch. He's got a blue armband, starts yelling, "Stop! Where are you going?" My buddy hits the brakes and the guy runs up with a rifle shouting, "Show your documents." We're in shock, just hand over our passports. He takes a look, probably noticed we're not military-age guys, and there's a woman in the back seat. I glance around and see more Ukrainians popping up from the ditch. One's got a machine gun. Later I found out they weren't even supposed to be there. No Ukrainian positions in that area. Turned out around 300 of them had broken through and were holed up in that part of the city, trying to break the siege and escape. They got taken out later as far as I know. Anyway, we passed through, checked on his house and my gym. On the way back, same Ukrainian guys still in the ditch, just waving us through this time. No shots fired. A few days later, we hear that a civilian car went through the same spot. Some people my buddy knew, and it got shot up. Why didn't they shoot at us? I don't know. Maybe God was watching over us. Our car was tinted too, could have easily looked suspicious. But somehow, we made it. That's just how fate played out. When Russian troops entered the neighborhood, it actually got safer. People could finally go visit neighbors or head to their garages to grab some things. Everything became a bit more free. At least you could move around without fear, more or less. The front line kept moving closer to the city center. People had completely lost hope of getting out. Everyone was thinking, that's it. We'll have to survive the fighting right here until the very end. And the front wasn't really moving. We saw Ukrainian soldiers every day. It didn't look like they were losing ground at all. They were just walking around as usual. At night, they fired mortars non-stop. Right next to the building we were in, there was a soccer field. They'd go out there, fire off 2 or 3 rounds, and run back into the buildings. 2 or 3 shots, and back into the stairwells. And of course, the return fire would come, at them and at us. That went on every single day. Mortar shots from them, and return fire raining down on us. Then, around the 15th, when people had already completely given up on the idea of escape, some guy who had been staying in the basement got a visit from a friend. His friend says, "Buddy, there's a way out, west side of the city. Let's try to get out." We were skeptical, thought it was just a desperate move. But this guy was serious, loaded his whole family in the car, like 9 people total, and they went. It was around 7 in the evening. No one in the basement even took their spots after they left. Everyone thought they would be back in half an hour, because there wasn't a way out. But they didn't come back. 30 minutes, an hour. People in the basement got anxious. What does that mean? Either something happened to them, or they actually made it out. And then around 10 p.m. somehow, by some miracle, one of us got a text message saying there was a way out. A green corridor. We realized we have to try. We were out of food. At that point, we were eating just one potato a day each. That was it, one potato per person, and even those were running out. All the other food had been gone for days, just water, and one potato each. That's all we had. People were already desperate, saying, "We have to try to get out no matter what." So the next morning, around 6 a.m., we start getting ready again. Everyone loads up their cars one more time. 6 cars total. I walking my grandma out to help her over to the cars. Everyone's already in their cars, and then shelling starts. Again. At that point I know there's nowhere to run. I keep walking with my grandma. We had to walk about 100 meters. Shells were falling nearby, but we just kept walking calmly. I told her, "Don't worry, it's far," even though it was landing maybe 100 meters away. We get to the car, get her inside, and then I spot a tank. Through the space between the buildings, a tank and an armored vehicle are rolling in. By then we were used to military vehicles, but this time they had Z markings on them. Those were Russians. That's when it hit me. The front line wasn't close anymore. It was right there. You could practically reach out and touch it. And then I see Ukrainian soldiers with RPGs flanking around the tank and armored vehicle. And a battle breaks out, a full-on firefight, around 150 meters from us. Right then we start driving, trying to get out of there. At that exact moment, this young couple comes running out of an apartment building. They're just looking to jump into any car anywhere just to escape. But all the cars are packed, no room, full of people, bags, everything. And then one guy, I still remember, he had a small Renault Sandero, tiny car. He opens the door and they just dive in. Somehow they crammed into a space where there really wasn't any space. He took them with him, and that's how we got out. We were driving, everything around us was burning, smoking. It all looked terrible. But we kept moving. Some were praying, some just staring out the window, some closing their eyes, trying to block it all out. We were in the last 500 meters before the Ukrainian block post at the city exit, driving through a private housing area where people were digging graves on the sides of the road. Just everywhere. They were burying neighbors and relatives. Every 30 meters or so we could see it happening. In apartment buildings, people didn't have that option. First, because of heavier shelling and denser buildings. Second, because there was simply nowhere to bury anyone. But in the private housing areas, people tried to do it. Without waiting for anyone to come collect the bodies, they just buried their neighbors right next to their homes. As we were approaching a Ukrainian block post, we hoped they would let us through. But the situation turned in our favor. The block post no longer existed. It had been destroyed along with everyone who was there, and that's what allowed us to escape. After that, there were no more mines, no more shelling, no one trying to kill us. Only block posts with Russian and Donetsk soldiers. That was it. And that's how we made it to the village where our grandparents live. We stayed there. It was safe. The war barely touched that place. There had been a small Ukrainian garrison there in the early days, but they left. And on the way to the next village, that Ukrainian group was destroyed. We left the city for Novoazovsk on March 22nd. Why did we leave? My mother, God rest her soul, was in the basement with my son. Right before we left, I came over, and my son said she wasn't eating at all anymore. Felt really unwell. So we decided to leave. We didn't know where to go, though. The fighting was very intense. But our car was still in one piece. I first drove around the neighborhood myself to check the situation, went to the Chechens on Azovstal Street. They said, If you have the chance, leave. They asked me what building we lived in. I told them. They said, "Oh man, that building. God forbid the Ukrainians get in there. You know what kind of battle it'll be for us to take it back? It's a mix of private houses and a five-story block. If you can get out, do it. Once the clearing starts, civilians could get hurt." And my mom's condition was just getting worse. We had to get her out of the city. I came back to my son, we talked it over. We also had 6 cats and a disabled dog. He had a dog too. We decided to leave. I drove around again to figure out the safest route. Tried heading toward the Ilyich district. Impossible. Heavy shelling there. Going through the city center wasn't an option. The bridge had already been blown up. So there was only one way, eastbound toward Novoazovsk. My mom was barely speaking by then. We got her into the car, packed only the essentials. We thought we were leaving for 3 to 4 days, just until our neighborhood got cleared. But things didn't go as expected. While we were getting out, we got under fire. But thank God we managed to escape the city. We scared the Russian soldiers near the church. There's a slope there. Everything's on fire, gunfire coming from all sides. A drone was tracking us. We were driving in 3 cars. Wherever we passed, explosions started hitting right behind us. I was driving first, sped up. The car was packed full. One soldier at a block post came out toward us. I stopped. He asked, "Why are you driving so fast?" I said, "Look over there." Everything behind us was burning. There was shelling from the direction we came. We made it to Novoazovsk. On the way, my mom died, right there in the car. We were stuck at a filtration point where all refugees were getting vetted in the village of Bezimenoye. The line was about 3 kilometers long. And mom had died, phones weren't working, nothing worked. Eventually, we talked to some officers, and they took her body to Novoazovsk. We stayed for a bit in the village of Sakanka, and then we went back to Mariupol. We slowly started rebuilding our homes and the neighborhood. I went to work. What else could I do? Later, I got a job when construction companies started showing up. I'm a dispatcher at a metallurgical plant with a higher education. And I went to work as a laborer. Well, what can you do? They paid money, we worked, rebuilt things. At first I worked near school number 41, then at the school itself, then at another company. It was fine. We were rebuilding Pashkovsky Street. Here I am, a plant dispatcher, up on a roof, fixing it for people. It was all right. They paid for the work. It was something you could live on. Dirty, unwashed. And then, for the first time, that military field bath showed up in the square. A special truck, a tent, and a shower. And that hot shower, the soap, it was pure bliss. It was so hard going that long without washing. Where would you even do it? There was barely any water, and it was cold. Where could you wash yourself? After the fighting, even strangers on the street would say hi and make small talks. "How are things over there? What area are you from?" People started feeling more united somehow. You'd be walking to get water, and total strangers would greet you, strike up small talk. Yeah, there were some conflicts, but rarely. It's true. The war really brought people together. Before the war, we had a nodding acquaintance with our neighbors. But once the war started, everyone pulled together. Some didn't have any food, others had a bit. And people shared. No one kept food to themselves. We shared everything. We cooked a common pot, gave food to the kids first. Then we'd eat whatever soup we could make. I went several times with other men to the worker provision department based at the tram depot. It was destroyed. We went there under shelling. We found compressed blocks of dog food, square-shaped, mostly bone and a bit of meat. We brought back a few of those and made some kind of soup out of them. And you know what? It was really tasty. There was nothing else. We ate what we had. My wife had always been drying orange peels for zest. Women know what zest is. At some point, that zest just sat in a box for a while. I found the box. The dried orange peels were still there. They tasted great. I even dipped a few in sugar. Hard times taught us to value even the smallest things. Later on, in May, humanitarian aid started coming in, and things got a bit easier. Then around August, we got water, electricity, and gas running again. I remember when water supply came back on, we binged on showers and baths, finally able to clean ourselves properly. I'd never really put material things above everything else in life, and especially not after going through the war. At 60, I finally understood the meaning behind what our grandparents used to say all the time, that the most important things are health and peace. We never really got it the way they meant it whenever they would wish us health and peace. I mean, think about those old Soviet slogans. Peace to the world, peace in the whole world. Those were words coming from people who had lived through the Great Patriotic War. We only went through just 3 months of active fighting. I'll tell you a funny story. So about 50 people had just come out of a basement. It was finally quiet, no shelling. I cracked a joke to cheer people up. I was like, "Hey, where are your masks?" And everyone just burst out laughing. I mean, really laughing out loud. You get what I meant? COVID masks. We were all dirty, hadn't washed in days. We'd spent so much time hiding in those basements. What masks are you even talking about? That moment really cracked everyone up. Then I said to them, "Look, we've just spent nearly a month and a half down in that basement. Just try for a second to imagine what it was like during the siege of Leningrad. 872 days. People were fighting and working in factories right there in the city. Just imagine how incredibly hard it must have been for them back then. During the fighting, everyone pulled together. War immediately shows who's really who. Women would go out under fire to get water while some guy's just sitting in the basement like, 'Did you bring me some?' Hold on. You've got arms and legs. Everything's fine with you. Why didn't you come with us?" Yeah, stuff like that happened too. But the moment the fighting stopped, people forgot everything. A lot of folks just forgot. During the battles, everyone stood together, helped each other. But once peace returned, everyone went back to being divided. That same tension came back, and I started thinking about it. Back in the time of the Great Patriotic War, people were completely different. The way they were raised, the way they were united by one idea. It was on a whole different level. You remember that motto, "He who was nobody will become everything." And that's how it turned out. My father was from a Greek village. He worked for many years at Azovstal. He used to say, "Son, if the USSR had been different, who would have needed someone like me?" He moved to the city, started working at the plant, joined the party, became a respected man. Those people were much stronger than us, mentally, physically, in their values and attitude toward life. That's why they survived such a hard war. Our generation is much weaker. I don't know why. Maybe it's the loss of certain values, family upbringing. People started comparing themselves again, envy came back. He's got a better car, and so on. But come on, seriously? Is that really what matters? In critical situations, a person's true nature comes out. You immediately see who's capable of what. Some go around bringing food to kids in basements, while others just hide and are too scared to step out. And some turn to looting. There were so many looters in Mariupol, stealing things they didn't even need. But I want to say that most people behaved with dignity, got through that time, helped each other, and stayed united. People survived because they supported one another. That's why we need to stay united, live in peace, believe in the Russian spirit, and we will win. Strength is in unity. Comparing Mariupol right after the assault to how it is now makes no sense. Back then, a city in ruins. Now, a living city. The population hasn't fully returned to pre-war levels, but it's very close. The city is alive now. Restaurants, schools, and kindergartens are opening, repairs are happening everywhere. But to me, it's clear that with better management, things could have been much better. Not just better, significantly better. There are huge problems in the utilities sector, but the biggest issue, I'd say, is with compensation housing. There are a lot of problems. Despite statements about a large number of new compensation buildings, only about 60 have been built, while around 400 were demolished. That's nearly a tenfold difference. And as far as I know, no new compensation housing is currently being built, just a few buildings being finished, and that's it. Some of the foundation pits are already overgrown with grass and bushes. These houses here were demolished in October-November 2022. Construction of new buildings was supposed to start in March 2023, but now it's April 2025. 2 years have passed and the pits are still here. No work is being done and we don't know what will be built. I think it'll be housing for mortgages. People who lived here, including my family, are all on the waiting list for compensation housing. But when we'll actually get it is unknown, because very little is being built for that purpose. Most of it is for mortgage housing. That's the plan here too. Mortgage housing. When and where we'll get our own place, we don't know. For now, we're renting, living in someone else's apartment, like many other Mariupol residents. God, like my grandma used to say, as long as there's no war, we can survive anything. We were lucky. Even though the infrastructure is damaged, shops are open, pensions are being paid, and we're still living in our own home. We didn't have to move. Others have it much harder. Some still can't get their homes restored. If someone lost a loved one, that's the worst. Everything else can be fixed. Look, they're repairing the building, and even inside the apartments. So life goes on. Yes, it does. Everything is really confusing when it comes to housing, especially mortgage housing. Right now, it's unclear what's happening with those projects. In the 6th district, near the stadium, all the buildings were demolished, and nothing is being built yet. Things in Mariupol are great now. Those who didn't lose heart are feeling just fine. Of course, going through all that and then working hard afterward, it's tough. It takes resilience and strength to rebuild your life, even just to set up basic everyday things again. But those who manage to do it, they've been rewarded. I have all the opportunities I need now to improve my life and the lives of my loved ones. And I'm not waiting for someone else to come and do it for me. There are big prospects now, in the city and across Russia. I see there are opportunities for people of all ages, if they're willing. Honestly, I've never had chances like this before. I used to have to fight hard for anything good. Maybe it's also because I've grown older and gained experience. The city is gradually transforming. It's okay. We can be patient. Those who wanted to stay here stayed. We're willing to endure. The worst is behind us. As I said, I sent my wife and kids to Kursk to stay with relatives. Now it's flipped. Her aunt's living here in Mariupol. Her home is in the Rilsk district of Kursk region, where fighting is happening now. They were evacuated, and she came to us. We found her a place nearby, and she's living here. And it's not a one-off. Many people from the Kursk region are now living in Mariupol. That's how quickly everything changes. I'm 62. We'll get through it. But young people need to come here so the city can grow. It's not easy. Let me tell you something. When I worked in construction, there were a lot of guys from other parts of Russia, even from Siberia, really cold places. They came in spring and were amazed. They saw early fruits, and when they saw mulberries, they didn't even know what it is. We told them, you can eat it. It's mulberries. They went to the sea, saw the warm, beautiful sea, and all of them said they wanted to move here. Many of them have housing in other regions and want to sell it to move here. Business needs to grow here, especially tourism. Of course, I felt some pressure. This forced Ukrainization, the ban on the Russian language, everything had to be in Ukrainian. Yes, I understand Ukrainian, but if it's forced on us, it is unacceptable. Like that member of parliament Ferion and others like her, those Ukrainian Nazi trying to deprive us of the Russian language. It was hard. They constantly humiliated Russians in their propaganda. I mean people like Farion. Of course, we felt uneasy. All that performative Ukrainianness felt unnatural and foreign to me. Before, we lived without any ethnic conflicts. And suddenly, all these contradictions popped up, all this Ukrainization. All of a sudden, there's this so-called titular Ukrainian nation, and people show up telling us how to live, how to speak, how to behave. From the start, it just wasn't viable. I was born in Mariupol and lived here my whole life. They tried to impose their values on our youth, and maybe if it had gone on longer, they might have succeeded. We felt a certain pressure, and I think not only in Donbas but also in other parts of Ukraine, especially in the southeastern regions. What kind of Ukraine is that? I still remember when I was a schoolboy, we went on a trip to the Cossack Stanitsa Uspinovka. There was an outpost and a model of the Don army. This is the land of the Don Cossacks. Novoazovsk, for example, used to be called Budyonovskaya Stanitsa. All these were Russian Cossack settlements. This is historically Russian land. But at some point it started being called Ukraine. When the USSR was formed, the Bolsheviks just drew administrative borders and decided this would be Ukraine. But historically, Ukraine never existed here. They can speak for Poltava, Chernihiv, maybe Kyiv, but we were never Ukraine, just like Odessa, Mykolaiv, Kherson, and the whole southeast weren't. They don't even know who Knyaz Potemkin was. Looks like those Ukrainians don't know their history at all and just listen to their propaganda. To them, it's all Ukraine, and Russians are nothing. But who built the economy? Who pushed forward science and technology in the USSR? And now look what's left of the Soviet legacy after Ukraine's independence. They inherited a developed country from the USSR and ruined it all. What did they build during independence? Nothing. What did they improve? Nothing. What is there even to discuss? It's all obvious. They're raising their children to hate Russians.